Kelsey Mitchell didn't just give an interview answer, she delivered a truth that echoed far beyond the Fever locker room. With steady conviction, she said Caitlin Clark has changed the world, changed the dynamic of basketball. Coming from anyone else, those words might sound like hype. But Mitchell isn't just another voice in the WNBA. She's the veteran who carried Indiana through years of irrelevance, the player who endured losing seasons, shifting rosters, and endless doubt. Her perspective carries credibility because she lived the hard years. That's why her words landed like a thunderclap across the league. This wasn't a polite compliment, it was validation, a confirmation that Clark has altered not only the Fever, but the sports culture itself. Analysts immediately debated what she meant. Was it admiration, a subtle hint at rivalry, or was Mitchell signaling something larger that Clark's arrival marked a turning point for women's basketball, the moment where everything changed forever? To understand the impact of Mitchell's words, you have to revisit her journey with the Fever. When she entered the league in 2018, Indiana was already sinking into obscurity. Over the next several years, the team became a punchline, racking up losing records while opponents treated games against them as easy wins. Mitchell was the one constant, playing through 5-win seasons and coaching changes that made stability impossible. She wasn't just competing, she was surviving, dragging the franchise forward when hope seemed absent. Each night she faced the press with forced optimism, speaking of building blocks after yet another blowout loss. For most players, those years would break their spirit. But Mitchell stayed, carrying the burden alone, her scoring often the only bright spot on the court. That's why her voice now matters so much. She lived the era before Caitlin Clark, the endless grind of losing, and her perspective gives weight to every word she speaks about the team's transformation. Everything shifted the moment Caitlin Clark arrived in Indiana. Before she even played a game, ticket sales spiked, cameras flooded practices, and the Fever became a headline instead of an afterthought. Clark wasn't just another draft pick, she was a cultural event. Her college career had already turned her into a household name, and her transition into the WNBA brought a level of attention the league had rarely seen. For the Fever, who had been invisible for years, it was like stepping into a new reality overnight. Suddenly, primetime games and sold-out arenas were the norm, and every move the team made was dissected on national platforms. What made this shift so remarkable was Mitchell's reaction. Instead of showing resentment, she openly embraced it, acknowledging Clark's star power as something the franchise desperately needed. Her praise wasn't empty. It was grounded in recognition that Clark had transformed Indiana from a rebuilding project into the center of basketball spotlight. From the outside, many expected tension between Mitchell and Clark. After all, this was a veteran who had endured the grind for years, suddenly asked to share the stage with a rookie who instantly became the face of the franchise. In sports, that kind of shift often sparks rivalry, jealousy, or quiet resentment. But Mitchell's words revealed the opposite. She positioned their relationship as a partnership, recognizing that Clark's presence could elevate not just the Fever, but her own game as well. By embracing Clark, Mitchell displayed leadership, choosing collaboration over conflict. On the court, you can see flashes of this connection. Mitchell using her scoring ability to complement Clark's passing vision, creating a dynamic that gives Indiana an edge they never had before. Her decision to align herself with Clark instead of competing against her isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It shows that Mitchell understands this moment is bigger than pride. It's about building something lasting together. What makes Mitchell's statement so striking is the respect embedded within it. In the WNBA, respect isn't handed out freely. It has to be earned on the court, possession by possession, season after season. Mitchell knows this better than anyone, having clawed for every ounce of recognition during her years in Indiana. That's why her acknowledgement of Clark carries weight. She wasn't offering charity to a hyped rookie, she was admitting that Clark had already proven herself. From her court vision to her scoring range, Clark's impact was undeniable from the start, and Mitchell chose to recognize that rather than resist it. In doing so, she elevated the conversation, showing maturity that only comes from years of battling at the highest level. Fans and analysts recognized the significance. Mitchell's respect wasn't just personal, it signaled that Clark had crossed an invisible threshold, earning validation from one of the league's most tested competitors. Mitchell's words weren't just directed at Clark. They were aimed at the entire WNBA. By declaring that Clark had changed the dynamic of basketball, she was sending a message to every team, every player, and every critic who doubted the Fever's relevance. It was a warning cloaked in respect. Indiana was no longer the easy win on the schedule. With Clark in the lineup and Mitchell embracing her role alongside her, the Fever suddenly represented a challenge. For a franchise that had been dismissed for so long, this shift was monumental. Mitchell's statement reframed the narrative, telling the league that Indiana was now a team with both star power and leadership. It wasn't just about the points Clark scored or the highlights that went viral. It was about a culture shift validated by the player who had endured the dark years. The message was clear: the Fever were done being overlooked. The reaction from fans to Mitchell's statement was immediate and powerful. Social media lit up with clips of her interview, with thousands sharing and commenting on the weight of her words. For longtime Fever fans, it was validation that the suffering years hadn't been for nothing, that their loyalty was finally being rewarded with hope. For new fans drawn in by Clark's stardom, it was an introduction to the backbone of the franchise, the player who kept Indiana alive when no one else was watching. Mitchell's words created a bridge between those two groups, uniting old and new supporters around a shared vision of change. Suddenly, the Fever weren't just another team, they were a movement, drawing attention across the country. And at the center of it all was the dynamic between Mitchell and Clark, one veteran and one rookie, together reshaping how people felt about women's basketball and what the future might hold. Mitchell's acknowledgement of Clark's influence stretched beyond the boundaries of the court. When she said Clark had changed the world, it wasn't just about points or assists. It was about visibility, representation, and momentum for women's sports as a whole. For years, the WNBA fought for respect, struggling against limited coverage and dismissive narratives. Clark's arrival flipped that script almost overnight, pulling national media, sponsors, and casual fans into the conversation. Mitchell, having lived through seasons when the Fever barely registered in headlines, understood the magnitude of this shift better than anyone. Her words pointed to something larger, the beginning of a cultural moment where women's basketball was no longer in the shadows. By validating Clark's impact, Mitchell wasn't only uplifting her teammate, she was acknowledging the broader transformation happening across the sport, a transformation that could redefine opportunities for future generations of players. Mitchell's statement will be remembered as more than just a post-game soundbite. It marked the acknowledgement of a turning point. For the Fever, it was the line that separated years of frustration from a future filled with possibility. For the league, it was proof that the WNBA was stepping into a new era of visibility and cultural relevance. And for Mitchell herself, it was a moment of leadership, showing she was willing to share the spotlight for the sake of something bigger than herself. Together with Clark, she symbolized a bridge between the struggles of the past and the promise of the future. What fans witnessed wasn't rivalry, but alignment. Two players with different stories now united under the same goal. In just a few words, Mitchell captured the reality. Caitlin Clark didn't just join the WNBA, she transformed it. And with Mitchell at her side, the Fever were no longer outsiders, but central to the game's unfolding story. What makes this moment between Mitchell and Clark so compelling is that it feels like the start of a legacy, not just a single-season storyline. Mitchell's recognition of Clark's impact wasn't only about what she has already accomplished, it was also about what comes next. The Fever are suddenly positioned as more than a rebuilding team, they're at the center of women's basketball's next chapter. Every sold-out crowd, every nationally televised game, and every viral highlight is shaping a future where young athletes see new possibilities. Mitchell's voice gave weight to that vision, grounding it in the lived struggle of years without glory. Clark brought the spotlight, but Mitchell's endorsement anchored it in authenticity. Together, they are crafting a narrative that fans will look back on as the moment the Fever shifted from survival to significance, and when women's basketball finally claimed the cultural respect it has long deserved.